Alright, we're going to be talking about boss relics today. I do kind of want to go over all relics eventually, but there's going to be enough to talk with just the boss relics alone to really warrant their own video. And if, starting with boss relics kind of makes sense to me because they're the ones you're generally going to see the most and have the most choice over and probably have the most direct effect on your runs. So knowing when to pick them and which ones are just generally better is pretty good. There's obviously a lot of situational things, but there's also relics that just straight up are so bad that you almost should never take them, and it might not be that obvious to new players. Wrist blades, for example, you should just never take it. We'll get into all that though, and so obviously these evaluations are mostly my own personal bias toward the relics, but I will say I'm a decent win rate on Ascension 20 Silent, and I will say we're mostly just going to be gearing towards Silent, as I'm really not as good. I haven't put the time into the other characters quite like I have with Silent, so I'm only briefly going to talk about the other class-specific relics, but really this is mainly geared towards Silent play. And I will say I am going to use data to at least support a few decisions, or at least open a little bit of discussion. I always take the run data with a grain of salt, because there's obviously so many things going on in a run that, uh, just the boss relic alone isn't responsible for your win or loss. But, over time, the more runs that you do, you should see evidence of which ones are affecting your win rate better than the others. But there's kind of hard to play enough games to really get a significant amount of data to really draw any super hard conclusions there. But I do think it's at least somewhat interesting to look at the data. So this is going to be my data. I'm limiting to 2020, the calendar year, just because I've kind of significantly upped my play since then, and I'm not really interested in taking a look at my earlier data. So, and then along with that, I know this is kind of sacrilegious, but I'm not gonna speak for Jorbs or anything, but I do want to say he's arguably the best player in the game, and he did release a good amount of his 2019 data. And I'm not gonna try to put words in his mouth. I just want to kind of look at what his run data kind of shows, and just to maybe support a few things that I'm going to talk about. So I think, and even what I'm going to say here first doesn't directly line up with my data necessarily, but this is just my general feelings. So I want to say what I think, in a general sense, the two best relics are, and that's going to be Snecko Eye and Runic Pyramid. Interestingly enough, you'll notice these are not actually energy relics, which are typically thought of as the best relics. I think energy relics are generally pretty good, but they always come with a downside that makes them a little more situational than these two relics are. I think people think that these relics are more situational than they realize they are. I would argue that you can safely take these two in almost every situation and be pretty okay with it. And ironically, the only situation I wouldn't even consider them in is if I had one or the other first, because these two relics do not play nicely with each other. You don't want to get a hand full of, eventually you're inevitably, how do you say that word, inevitably going to end up filling your hand with 3 and 2 costs, and you're just going to be screwed. So definitely don't take them if you have one or the other, but especially if it's like your first boss relic, it's hard. The way I kind of think of it is, if I see either of these, my baseline is that those are my choice, and the relics that are offered beside it have to have a really good reason for me to pick them over them. So I'd like something like a coffee dripper, if I saw it alongside Snecko Eye or Runic Pyramid, I'd have to see that I had a lot of like built-in healing in my relics or whatnot to really push it past them. Curse Key, I'd probably need like an Amamori or some sort of curse synergy. Even then, I don't know. Like Snecko Eye, I find is so good that it's really hard for me to take anything over it. I don't know. I just think this is such an incredibly strong relic. And I'd like to make a few notes on these two. I think people are, like I said, a little too hesitant to pick them. Like using Silent as an example, I think people hesitate when picking well-laid, like say you had a well-laid plans already and it affects your decision to not take Runic Pyramid. I think that's a big mistake. I would say most of the time I pick this, I already have a well-laid plans. It's pretty common for you to have it. Like you're usually going to have at least one in your deck if you saw it offered, right? And often that's before you get your boss reward. But you know, you just remove it. You're sacrificing removing one strike, I suppose, but that's really not that bad when you factor in how good Runic Pyramid is. Runic Pyramid is good in a lot of ways. Like, so think of well-laid plans, right? It's one of the best powers in the game, and it literally just takes that already amazing power and applies it to every single card in your deck for the whole fight. So already it has an incredibly powerful effect for your fights. But along with that, one of the issues with Silent in particular is they have a lot of cards that are, I would say, either completely useless or just generally useless, or at the very least underwhelming. But Runic Pyramid takes a lot of those cards that I would classify in the generally useless category and makes them useful, which in a way kind of like another effect you get with Runic Pyramid is your options when you take cards are significantly opened up. I can't think of anything really that so as far as card choices go, I can't think of too many cards that become less appealing once you have Runic Pyramid, but I can think of a whole hell of a lot that become more appealing. So it opens up your options. Still don't fill your deck up with dark cards you don't need, but it just makes it so you get a lot less duds offered. Like it really, going into Act 2, your game plan really has to shift quick from the Act 1 game plan, and being able to just have less chance of getting complete dud options is pretty huge. So for example, something like Concentrate, which is pretty much useless in any normal deck, is actually a viable pick in Runic Pyramid. Still not like a top tier pick, but what I would say is if you find yourself having trouble emptying out your hands, or otherwise just having troubles finding energy with Runic Pyramids, or in a Runic Pyramid run, Concentrate is maybe a card you're looking for. And even something like Outmaneuver, granted I still would like to see it upgraded. I think it's a lot better upgraded, but Outmaneuver I would almost never take it outside of Runic Pyramid, but in Runic Pyramid it can be okay, especially if it's upgraded. And even other cards that are already kind of okay, like Calculated Gamble's a perfectly fine card on its own. It's like even, I'd say, better in Runic Pyramid. You're generally getting way more cards drawn, and it takes care of issues you might run into with Runic Pyramid, with like cards you don't want kind of clogging up your hands. And even something like Prepared, I still think Prepared is pretty generally useless, but in Runic Pyramid it can make sense, especially upgraded. It just kind of, for no energy at all, cycles itself. And even something like Deflect. I don't typically take Deflect in normal decks. I probably take it a little more than those other cards I've mentioned, because it has at least a little bit more general use, but usually it's only if I'm really hurting for energy, which is often the case with Runic Pyramid. So you know, especially if you have like a footwork, deflect becomes a really good card in Runic Pyramid. You're kind of more inclined to take those some of those lower energy cards, but I wouldn't extend that to say something like Slice. I still think Slice isn't really worth ever adding to any deck, no matter what. I think it's just such a bad card. But we'll go. I do want to do a full like card breakdown video at some point. Maybe that'll be the next thing I do. But yeah, I've kind of beaten Runic Pyramid to death. I think if you find yourself not taking it much, you should definitely give it a shot. I will say Runic Pyramid, especially compared to a lot of the other relics, does require a lot of game knowledge to properly make use of. So you might, you know, it might seem a little weak at first, but it's something you should definitely give. Let's put it this way. Going back to, you know, I said I had some run data here. So it is Jorb's most winning card according to the 2019 data, right? And then again, you know, take it with a grain of salt. There's a lot of variance that can happen, and it's not a huge sample size necessarily, but it's kind of hard to ignore the fact that he has 50 wins at a 59% win rate with it. So obviously it's a pretty good relic, right? At least I would say this supports my evaluation of it. Now in mine, it's still pretty good. I have a 38% win rate, which is lower than I would like, but also my sample size is much smaller, so it's a little harder to really go off win rates. I had more, you know, I'm sorting by just total wins here. I more look at it as just like it's my, you know, fourth to, you know, tied for fourth most winning relic, and I think I think the more games I play, I would expect it to gravitate more to where Sneko-Eye is right now. But yeah, so that's Runic Pyramid. Now Sneko-Eye, in a similar sense, I think people don't take it enough. You kind of get two camps of people in terms of not taking it enough. I think the first is that people that are really kind of just clueless to the power of the relic and they just never take it. I don't necessarily blame them, because on paper it doesn't really actually sound that good, right? So I remember when I was kind of a newbie, I never took this ever. It just seemed like the most trash relic when I would read the effect, because it's like, you know, I thought, you know, sometimes I'd have some struggles with that fight against the Sneko, you know, the dude that confuses you. And I'm like, wow, that is like a really rough buff to just only get the advantage of drawing 2 cards per turn, right? Like, why would I ever want that? And then I just kind of took it on a whim once, and then I also started watching Jorbs and saw how often he picked it, and especially, I'll get into this with the second camp later, but it's like he even took it when he had no 2 costs, you know, everything was 1 or 0 costs, and he took it over, you know, some pretty good, I think, like good energy relics, and that really made me think. So I started trying out for myself, and yeah, this is like to me, this is the best boss relic in the game, for me at least. I think if I continue to improve, maybe Runic Pyramid will surpass it, but it just, you know, it's so, you know, I've heard the argument that people don't find it fun because it's like stressful to have bad, you know, bad RNG with it. I actually find it the least stressful. My least stressful runs are with Sneko-Eye. It's like I can breathe a sigh of relief and know that I'm gonna have pretty easy decisions. Honestly, like with Sneko-Eye, with Runic Pyramid, every decision is very, very important and hard to really know what the correct decision is a lot of the time. But with Sneko-Eye, usually your decision is kind of laid out for you in the form of which cards were low energy. Only every now and then do you have to make the tough call of like, oh, am I going to play this 3 or 2 card energy and have a really inefficient turn just to like get the effect? Like, yeah, that'll happen every now and then, but really it's less than you'd think. And honestly, you know, the devs release the source code to this game. You can look at it. I assure you that I've checked it out, and there is no special clause in there that says that your user is to have worse RNG than anybody else. So what I'm saying there is, yes, you're going to have some bad RNG with it, but you kind of take the good with the bad. It's generally going to be good, and I will say, even in terms of like overall variance, while yes, it introduces variance where you can have some low rolls on your high energy cost cards, but I would actually argue overall the variance is actually lessened. Just your overall variance that can be experienced in any given run, fight, or turn is reduced because the 2 additional cards actually, because you're just getting that many more options. Like sometimes you just need one specific card, and it doesn't matter the energy cost. You know you're going to be able to play it with Sneckwire, because another thing to keep in mind, the randomized costs, it doesn't really outline this well in the description of the card. Or the description of the debuff, I guess. I call it a buff in Sneckwire, but it's 0 and 3, so it can't get above 3. So you're always going to be able to play, the card. It's just sometimes you might not be able to play anything else with it. That's just kind of the hit you have to take sometimes. Most of the time that's not happening. Like, just the math, like, do the math. It's really unlikely that happens. And yeah, you're going to remember. It's human nature to remember those bad turns. But if you look at any card game, poker, Hearthstone, Slay the Spire, good card players don't get too bent out of shape. They call it tilt and whatnot. Like, a good card player doesn't get bent out of shape because of low rolls. Everyone will. It's like inevitable, but you can't let that just like sour your thought to such a strong relic. If you're really cared about winning the game and winning at higher rates, and you're not taking this relic, you're definitely fucking up. And the second camp, I would say, that also doesn't take this enough is the people that only really take it when they have like a high cost average deck. I've proven in my videos before just that you can have 1s and 0 costs and no 2 costs, nothing above 1, and you can take this relic and it'll do just fine for you. It's still a huge upgrade. Drawing those 2 additional cards each turn is just huge, and it's weird how it works out. It's really hard to lay out the math here, but like, the extra 2 cards, it really kind of makes the confusion debuff not really a debuff, and you can really witness that when you take Sneckwire. And everyone's kind of made this mistake before, like you take Sneckwire and then you get orange pellets and it clears your debuff, and then you actually see like how much you wish you just still had that quote-unquote debuff. It's like usually the clearing of it kind of makes things harder for you. The confusion is actually really good when you have a deck size or a hand size minimum of 7 cards each turn. And you're still usually taking cards like Backflip, right? You're still taking cards that draw. Drawing is still great in Sneckwire. That's why I've even illustrated the fact that a 0 cost, like Calculated Gamble, is still very strong in Sneckwire, even with its average cost at now 1.5, So yeah, that's kind of the deal there. And looking at my data, it is my best boss relic, at least in terms of total wins. I guess I have a higher win rate with some of these, but at this sample size, win rate is almost just whatever. With Jorbs, it's second in terms of overall wins, and still, that's pretty insane win rate. We actually have a pretty similar win rate with Sneckwire, which should tell you something, right? Like, should tell you it's a pretty damn good relic. So those, to me, are just hands down the 2 best relics, and they can be taken almost regardless of situation. And also similar to Runic Pyramid, probably not so much, but it just opens up your card choices. Like, if you are like hurting for attack damage, generally I'm not taking a whole lot of attacks outside of Act 1, but when I get Sneckwire, if I still need some damage early Act 2, I'm not opposed to taking even like a riddle with holes, especially if I see like a predator. I'll probably fill my deck with a few of them, like maybe a couple of them, right? Predators are really good in Sneckwire. It's really good normally, but even better in Sneckwire, right? You're just reducing the cost. You're drawing a ton more cards. I mean, you draw pretty much a full hand the next turn if you play Predator. If you got a full hand, you're sitting great with Snecko Eye. And even like like even a card that's generally useless like Eviscerate can be okay. And then other cards like in Venom is kind of situational, but in Snecko Eye I usually take it. Even it's just unupgraded. It's now already reduced in its over average cost, and then even then it's like I don't even necessarily think of the cards as having 1.5 average cost now. I think of it more like half the time it's going to cost 1 or 0, and then I don't. And the other times it's like 2 or 3. I could still play it, but like the fact that Envenom can come in at 0 and 1 costs, even upgraded, makes it so less awkward to play. Because 50% of the time it's just a super easy play. And then you got other cards that you can combo with it, like Riddle with Holes, which are normally not really a card you're looking to add. But in Snecko Eye plus Envenom, now you got a pretty good card, right? So now let's go on. Maybe we should talk about some of the other non-energy relics that I find to be pretty powerful before we dive into the energy relics. So the first of those I probably want to go over is Astrolabe. It is low-key a pretty good relic. So let's look. For me, it's got 50%, 6 and 6. For Jorbs, about the same. Picks it a lot. With Jorbs, it's like he's always going to have a good win rate because he's just a high win rate player. What I look at with Jorbs data to maybe make some evaluations here is simply just how much does he pick it. Because if he picks it a lot, that means that obviously he values it to a certain degree, and it has a lot of situations where it can be picked. So sometimes I've kind of checked this data, seen pick rates, and if they're vastly different from mine, it made me kind of think, okay, if the best player picks this often, maybe I'm missing something with the relic, right? And we'll get to that. Like I'm still kind of wondering about this relic, but we'll get to all that in a bit. So we were talking about Astrolabe though. So it's his 4th most winning card or relic. I always fucking call these relics cards. If I say card, just translate in your head to relic. It's gonna happen again, I'm sure. So Astrolabe, I don't know. It's just really good. The thing is, like, energy. It's really examine your losses in Act 2 because everybody loses in Act 2 more than they lose in every other act. At least all the people that Jorbs loses in Act 2 more than he loses in all other acts, and so do I. I don't really have a whole lot of data of other players to run through my data models unless somebody wants to volunteer them, but I believe on the Spire logs it's also Act 2 is the biggest act you lose. So think about what causes those losses a lot of the time. A lot of those times you're picking an energy relic, but your deck, you're just not drawing into what you need, and it doesn't matter that you have that extra energy. Like, who cares if you have the extra energy to play an extra strike, right? I would much rather just not have had that extra energy, not have had whatever downside comes along with the energy relic, and simply just not drawn the strike, and instead drawn a different card in upgraded form. That's what you're getting with Astrolabe. It just, deck consistency, you can't undervalue it. That's why it's so important to remove strikes. And I always go through cycles where I get a little lazy with that, and then that becomes apparent usually when you're, especially like late game, and you draw these strikes when you could have just drawn the card you needed. And even in Silent, where I think I evaluate the Silent as having the largest pool of like bad cards, in my opinion. Even then, Astrolabe is still just really good in Silent. True, you can get like a Reflex or something, and that's just unfortunate, but Reflex is pretty bad regardless, but there's some of the other cards, like Outmaneuver, for example. In upgraded form, it's at least like pretty okay. It's definitely better than a strike, right? So you're definitely, I would definitely rather have an upgraded Outmaneuver than a strike, and that's I would say even a low roll, right? You can get some pretty high rolls there. You can get, you know, an upgraded Crippling Cloud or Wraith Form. You know, there's a lot of good cards you can get too. So you take the good with the bad, just like anything in a card game. On average, Astrolabe is just really good. You're generally not getting something worse than a strike, right? So at the very least, you're getting an immediate and permanent benefit from getting this. Unlike a lot of these, like a lot of these relics have such crazy negative effects. Looking at you, Runic Dome, that it's like it's almost like a downgrade some of the time. Um, yeah, so that's really all I have to say about Astrolabe. I should probably lump Astrolabe, Empty Cage, and even Pandora's Box together. Empty Cage is funny because I used to think this was useless. Now I'm like, it's definitely not on the level of like an Astrolabe or even maybe Pandora's Box. I don't know, maybe it's similar, but like it is actually an okay boss relic. It's like, it's not sexy at all, right? Like it's pretty boring. It'd be awesome if it was 3. Like I would really like to see it remove 3 cards, but even at 2 cards, I would actually say it's kind of middle of the road. If you look, now granted, there's another thing to keep in mind with the 2019 data here for Jorbs is the pool was different back then. This also only goes, for whatever reason, it only goes like halfway through the year, so it didn't catch anything from the new patch. So the overall boss relic pool was worse back then, so Empty Cage was even better. I don't know what it would look like in 2020. I'd be interested to see that. But as you can see here, it's still making the first of 3 pages here in terms of winning. So it's not like super top tier, but it's also like pretty okay. I mean, look at some of the other. It's above. It's one more than Coffee Dripper has, and I think Coffee Dripper is a pretty good relic. It's one. You know, a lot of these are good. Not this one, but yeah, we'll get to all that. And for me, it's ironically on the same, you know, 10th spot here. It's not horrible. I mean, 36%. It's higher than my overall win rate. If it's like pretty higher than my overall win rate, well, I mean, win rates, you know, whatever. At 4 and 7 is such a low sample size. This is like whatever, but it's obviously okay, right? Like, I don't see anything to suggest that it's a bad boss relic. You might want to take it. I would definitely take it over anything that I consider pretty bad. Like I consider Wristblades bad. I consider Tiny House bad. I consider Black Star. We'll get to that soon. I consider it bad, but I'm willing to admit there's maybe something I'm missing here. But yeah, so you know, deck consistency. Just removing. You're usually removing strikes. Maybe sometimes you're removing curses. Just makes your deck more consistent. It's a nice little upgrade. It's not huge, but it's certainly better than like a Tiny House or something. And then the other one is Pandora's Box. So if we go back to his data, it's still up there. It's like right there with Coffee Dripper. You know, it obviously looks like it's pretty okay. It's a little more situational given that he chooses it, you know, maybe about half as much as Astrolabe and all the really good relics, but so the situations I would say that are fine to take this in are like, because remember, all your defends are getting removed. That's the big thing here. So if you don't have a good amount of additional like purely defense cards, so stuff like backflip, leg sweep, for silent, those are 2 of the really good block cards, and even to a lesser extent, like Blur, even some dodge and rolls, or dash, even dash works, but like something that generates defense, maybe some piercing wails, wraith forms. If you don't have like an okay amount of those, you probably shouldn't take Pandora's Box because there's a pretty high chance for just not getting any actual defense cards. You may get 1 or 2, but like removing all the defense can be pretty rough, and that can set you up for failure. Hence why it's not really like picked super often. For me, let's see, how often do I pick it? So I've only picked it 6 times in 2020, and it's won me 2 of those. I think it's a little better than my data suggests, but yeah. So that's really the situation I would pick it in. And I guess also I'd still pick it if my choices beside it were like Wrist Blades and Tiny House. I'll be willing to roll the dice, because these are just, to me, these are losing plays. These are like so far below the power level of what a boss relic should be that you're like consigning yourself to defeat by taking them. So let's go over, I want to go over really quick. I said I'm mainly focusing on the silent, so I want to really briefly go over the character-specific boss relics for the other characters. Black Blood, I don't think it's very good. Now, granted, it did get buffed up by giving it like 4 extra HP, but I don't actually think that matters. I think the same problem with the relic still exists. So you'll notice with Jorbs, out of all these runs, he took it once. Now, granted, he did win with it, but you know that's a vacuum at that point, and he clearly didn't value it that much in 2019. I watch his runs somewhat often. I've never seen him take it in 2020. I'm sure he has, but I don't know. I really think it's a pretty useless relic. Then again, I'm not super amazing at Ironclad, so take that with a grain of salt. Mark of Pain's a similar story. I think it's probably the worst energy relic, other than maybe Runic Dome. He's only took it 5 times. Just as you know, as we've talked about with deck consistency, this basically does the opposite in exchange for energy. Granted, fire breathing got an upgrade since then. I don't really think that's relevant though to actually making this takeable. I don't think getting the extra damage really nullifies the downside of just having these 2 status cards. Really, the only way to mitigate it is by having like a evolve and having it bottled, which doesn't really change anything from that patch to this patch. And what was the other Ironclad specific one? Oh yeah, Runic Cube, which is also like, you know, 3 times, they're all losses. Just doesn't do enough. Like, yeah, you have a lot of self-damage. I don't know. It's just not on the power level of a boss relic. So that's Ironclad. We'll get to Silent in a little bit. Defect. Defect probably has, compared to Ironclad and Silent, better starting relics. But still, I think they're a little overrated. Like Frozen Core, I don't think it's very good at all. You know, he took it, what? Did he take it at all? I guess he took it 3 times. Maybe it has some very niche uses, but in a general sense, I just don't think it's very good. For the level of a boss relic, it's like generating you maybe, it's like maybe playing a chill on average in an AoE fight. For, I guess, I mean, chill's already free to play, but I guess you don't have to draw it, and you don't have to occupy 1 card slot for it. But it also ramps up slower, so I don't know, I just don't think it's very good. Now, Inserter, I like this relic just from a fun standpoint, and I think it's really good with Consume. Like, if you have Consume, it's really top tier, but otherwise, I think it's pretty overrated. One way you can think about it is, like, it takes 4 turns to basically just do what an unupgraded capacitor would have done immediately for, like, 1 energy. Granted, it keeps persisting through the fight, so for like really long fights, it can be pretty good, but a lot of fights aren't really that long, and yeah, you can like prep it up to insert on turn 1, but even then, sometimes you don't even want that. Sometimes you want to just evoke your orbs by cycling through them, and I don't necessarily see any data here to suggest that it's like a super good relic. It's picked like an okay amount of times, the win rate isn't stellar. Yeah, I just think there's better boss relics a lot of the time than Inserter, but I will admit it's a very fun relic to play. And then Nuclear Battery, let's see, that one I guess is picked even less than Inserter, which is interesting though, because to me, Nuclear Battery is like the best starting relic, or character-specific boss relic of all the original 3 characters, I think it's pretty good. I think it helps Defect do... It has no real downside. You could argue maybe it's a little underwhelming, but like it helps you really get going at the start. You know, it's basically like having an energy relic for however many turns until it's evoked, and then the turn it's evoked, you get a huge energy spike, and then sure, after that you have no benefit from it, but usually that's enough to get some pretty good scaling going. Like that can allow you to get an echo form going without having to spend like all your energy on the echo form and whatnot. So I think it's pretty good, but then again, I'm not super good at Defect. Defect is the other character I'm ramping up on currently to get a good win rate on with. So you'll probably see some videos soon with Defect from me. But I don't know. I think it's pretty good. But maybe it's not. I don't know. And Watcher, I think the Watchers. She only has 2 for whatever reason, but I think they're really good. I think this one's super good. It's just like really, really good, actually. And this one's pretty good, too. But not much to say there. I don't have any data there to really talk about. So now let's go to the silent specific character ones. They're all pretty useless. Wristblade. So this one... So I'm going to toot my own horn here and say that I'm actually pretty good at making quote-unquote Shiv decks work in... and on Ascension 20, like I actually don't lose to Time Eater very often with the Shiv deck, which is like everybody's fear is Time Eater with a Shiv deck, right? Because I think people don't understand what makes a Shiv deck work on Ascension 20. Like, they really don't. I've tried to explain it a few times. It's usually met with a lot of hostility, but I'm telling you, like, so even look here, like, here I have, like, card choice rates per act. This is Jorg's data. Look at accuracy, how many times he took it. What's that number right there? How many times was it offered? How many times did he take it? This is the best player in the world. How many times do they take accuracy? I know they did Shiv. I know they did Shiv, because let's find, where is it? Infinite Blades. HIJK. Element OP. Infinite Blades, Act 1, took it 23, only skipped it 14 times. Acts 2 through 4, took it 11 over 57 times. Like, he clearly uses Shivs, but, hey, what's this we see here? 0 on accuracy. Shiv damage is not what makes a Shiv deck work. Also, let's look at Wristblades. Took it 2 times. Did win with 1 of them, but took it 2 times. So, and if you look at that, it's only 4 additional damage, which is actually, it's in between a unupgraded and upgraded accuracy. So not even, you know, as much as an upgraded accuracy, which is already not that good of a card, clearly, right? It just, damage to your Shivs is not what makes them work. Because here's the thing with Shivs. If you get a good Shiv deck going, you're going to fly through the game no problem. You don't need accuracy, you don't need Wristblades, you don't need any extra damage on those Shivs from things like that, right? And you will fly through the game until you hit the Act 3 bosses. Especially Time Eater, but I would argue Awoken One as well. But mainly Time Eater. And then even if you get past them, you're going to have a really fucking hard time on the Heart. I'd actually say the Heart is much harder than Time Eater, as far as Shiv decks go. And the thing is, adding damage, just straight damage to your Shivs, is not this, is just the pure definition of win more. It's not solving the problems of Time Eater, it's not solving the problems of the Heart, which are your 2 biggest roadblocks to making a Shiv deck work. So when you add something like a accuracy, or you take a Wristblades when you could have got anything else, it's just, you know, in the case of accuracy, it's occupying a card slot that could have just been something else, something better. You know, if you're looking for scaling in terms of shivs, the things that you need to look for are like card-wise, After Image, and Venom. Those are the two best cards for scaling, but you'll notice they're rares, which really is, you know, aptly named because it is rare that Shiv decks can beat the heart. It should never be your first choice to try to seek out Shiv decks, in my opinion. You really only take them when that's kind of what you're forced into. Yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, and also as terms of scaling, kunai, how do you say it, kunai? And so let's go find these relics real quick. So where is it? Where is that? Like, looks like a dagger. Yeah, kunai gives you 3 attacks. You get dexterity, and then shuriken as well. Where's the shuriken? You get a strength. Even ornamental fan, you get some block. And even stuff like nunchaku, pendib, things like this are how you scale. Or, you know, the best situation is actually Snecko Skull and Venom plus your shivs. That's pretty insanely good. But, you know, as you can, and it's like you're not guaranteed to get any of these. And I will say you don't actually need the relics though. Like if you have Venom, that's actually just enough to make a shiv deck work. But you still need options for defense. So you're still looking for your piercing whales. You're still looking for wraith forms. And then you still want options offensively to take on Time Eater and the Heart. And I'd hate to break it to you, but those usually don't involve playing your shivs. You'll play a little bit against them, but you really need to limit. Like, I would try like hell not to play Infinite Blades if I have to, for example. It's a card that is really good up until that point, but it's kind of a curse. Like, if you start generating shivs every turn, those are going to start cycling through your deck, and you really don't want to draw a shiv, right? So against the Heart, who has Beat of Death, against Time Eater, who every card you play is going to come a step closer to ending your turn and giving him strength, like, you just don't want to play shivs. And that's, I think, the conundrum people don't. It's like, on Ascension 20, it's very rare I'll have a deck that is so all-in on any one thing, right? The only thing you can really all-in on is, like, poison from mid to late game. But even then, I don't know, I still want some high-value attacks, and I still need good defensive cards. Like, just because you have a deck with shivs in it, let's say, that are your main way of carrying you through the game up until the end game, you still need other game plans here, because remember, Time Eater is a hard counter to a deck like a deck that is all in on shivs, right? You don't want to get hard countered. So you need to be on the lookout still for things like Catalyst or Nightmare, a bunch of Wraith forms, Piercing Wells. You need ways to beat Time Eater. And I'm telling you, just adding damage to your shivs is not it. So I beat that horse to death. Maybe I'll do a shiv deck like video at some point. But Wrist Blades just sucks. I would almost just say never take it. Like ever. Maybe if you are like all in on shivs and it's like a Hail Mary, maybe then. But if you're if you're like a struggling player looking to get your first Ascension 20 win, or even just climb Ascensions, like, I would say just ignore the super niche type things and really just go for the solid, tried and proven, just generally good strategies first. So what else we're gonna go over? Hovering Kite. So this one, I will say, back then was completely useless. You still took it 3 times, I guess. It's a little bit more useful now. I don't know if it's useful enough, though, that this number would change much. It's still pretty damn useless. The only time I ever consider it is if I have Tools of the Trade. That's really the card that enables this. It's just rare, though, because like I don't really think Tools of the Trade is that great in the first place, so like I would have to have it in my deck first to even consider this relic. So it's like rare that I come across that situation. But it's happened before. I've had it win me runs before. Let's look at so let's see, how many times have I taken it? Hovering Kite. I've taken it once. Okay. Well, I guess I only took it once in 2020, but it did win me that run, so I'm very picky with when I take it. Yeah, I wonder if this is all my data, because I'll have to check. My laptop might be not firing data in. I know I've taken it more than once, so that I'll have to investigate that. But anyway, what's the other silent specific? Oh yeah, Ring of the Serpent. This is one I used to think was okay, and now I just think is utterly useless. One way you can think of it, it's like drawing 2 additions. So it nerfs your initial draw, so it's already kind of a downgrade. And then only by turn 3 have you even actually drawn an additional card overall, compared to just the normal starting relic. So that's pretty bad. Considering boss relics should be a pretty powerful thing, that doesn't really seem very powerful to me, right? To me, this should actually just draw. If they want this to be like Taken, it should just draw 2 additional cards every turn. That's like a significant upgrade. And even then, I don't know if it's like, I think I'd still rather just have Snickle Skull, oddly enough. But I don't know. Maybe I'd have to see it in action to really know if that would be overpowered or not. But as it stands, it's pretty underwhelming. He's taken it, so Jorbs takes it. What? Does he even take it? Ring of... It doesn't look like he even took it once, so that should probably tell you something about it, right? And have I even taken it? Ring of the Serpent. I've taken it 4 times. Won with it once. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's still better than like a Wrist Blade or a Hovering Kite that doesn't have Tools of the Trade, I guess. Probably better than Tiny House, but other than that, there's not much I would take over this. Or there's not much I would take this over. It just doesn't do enough. And honestly, I usually would rather just have 2 extra cards on turn 1 that then get a higher chance of getting my scaling going or whatever I need. So that's all the character-specific boss relics. So maybe we'll just go through these in order from here on out. So Black Star, this is the one I have troubles with, because I have this dilemma where Jorbs actually took it a decent amount of time and it did okay for him, but there's also the fact that, like, I don't know, so it's kind of, back then the pool wasn't as good, so it's like, it was probably better than a lot of these, you'll see other things that, like Eternal Feather is only taken like twice. I think White Beast Statue isn't even taken, so there's like a lot of these other boss relics that would probably make it a lot easier to choose Black Star over them. But then again, he's also taking it more than a lot of these like energy relics, so maybe I'm missing something here. You can see my data with it. I'm 1 and 8 with it. I just don't. To me, it seems like a win more relic. Like, it's really rough to take as your Act 1 boss reward. Oh, and you know, I should hover over. So it just makes elites drop 2 relics when defeated. So like, if it's my Act 1 boss reward, it gives you no benefit, you know, no immediate benefit, and the normal fights are no joke, right? The Act 2 normal hallway fights, you know, the avocado shelled parasite, him and his fungal parasite buddy, like even the 2 thieves, like everything, pretty much everything. Ironically, the only actually that, well, okay, I don't want to get on too many tangents here, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I need something. Like, I just want some benefit, and this gives you none. Maybe the argument is it's better taken as a Act 2 boss reward. I can see that. It feels less shitty to me then. But then again, it's like, how many relics are you really getting then? Like, let's say you were forced, like, a lot of times you're taking your green shard fight Act 3, so your path is somewhat forced. So you may not be able to take on that many elites depending on the path you're forced into. And you don't know what path you're taking before you take this relic, right? So you take it, and then maybe you'd fight 2 bosses, right? So really all it did is it gave you 2 extra relics. And I guess 3 if you count the Act 4 boss, but I would argue most of the time the Act 4 relic is a dud. But that's a whole different discussion. And most Act 3 relics, I would say, are duds, because there's so many relics that really are duds when you draw them late. So it's like, I don't know, it doesn't seem that powerful as an Act 2 boss reward. Still gives you no immediate benefit. And as an Act 1 boss reward, you theoretically could get a lot of relics from it, but I've never really witnessed that. Usually if I take this, even when it seems like I have a strong deck, the fact that I got no actual immediate benefit, it just means I can barely take on any elites, and usually I just fucking die. It's like my dilemma is, okay, take on elites and die, or avoid them and just die later. You know, like, I don't know. It doesn't seem that good, but I think I'm missing, it's very possible I could be missing something here just based on this, right? Like the fact that the best player clearly can make use of it. There's probably something I'm missing here. I would be really interested to figure that one out, though. So, and then Busted Crown. My thoughts on this relic are that it's pretty okay as an Act 2 boss reward, but it should almost never be taken as an Act 1 boss reward. Gimping your card rewards to, especially on Silent, like gimping your card rewards to 1, unless you have a question card, I guess, but like that's pretty rare, is just like so abysmally bad. Think of the pool of cards that are bad are high enough that you'd be getting so many duds, and you're just never going to fill your deck out, and like who cares about the extra energy at that point? I really think it should just never be taken in Act 1 boss reward, but as an Act 2 boss reward, if you can evaluate your deck and say, you know, this is, my deck is pretty complete, it's definitely a fine relic to take. You know, you can see it's pretty situational, because it's like he takes it somewhat often, but it's definitely not like on these sort of just always generally pretty useful type boss relics. It's probably, I mean, honestly, I could probably set the data up to find it out, but I'd be wondering how many times he takes it in Act 1 versus Act 2. And for me, I don't know, how often do I take it? Busted. Yeah, decently often, I guess. And it does okay for me. So that's Busted Crown. Calling Bell, this is an interesting one. This one I don't really pay heed to his low. Like, yeah, I took it 3 times, but keep in mind it was a completely different relic back then, so. And it, unlike Black Blood, where it just sort of didn't really change, it completely changed the whole game plan, so I don't know if it's like necessarily good now, but I would guess he takes it more. I've seen him take it somewhat often. He definitely doesn't like seek it out a lot, but I will say I don't necessarily take it that much. But it did okay for me. I don't know, I think it's okay. Like, it does come back to kind of the Mark of Pain issue, where it is adding inconsistency to your deck, but it's at least only 1 curse. You could also technically nullify that if you have Omamori, or you can make it into a benefit if you have like a Dubu doll. And, you know, 3 relics, it's a lot of relics. I'd say it's generally more relics than I'm ever getting from a Black Star on average, because I'm usually only able to take it as the final reward. But yeah, the curse at least doesn't do anything to you. It just can't be removed, and it takes up a card slot, but it at least isn't like making you frail or limiting the cards you can play, so it's not like a horrible curse. And also, of note, you can do weird things with it, like if you have Centennial Puzzle and Blue Flame, you could like play it to make yourself draw some cards for minimal damage, stuff like that. But yeah, not much. I think it's okay. as far as non-energy boss relics go, I wouldn't put it on the level of like an Astrolabe or the other pretty good ones. It's similar. I think I would value it similar to like Empty Cage and Pandora's Box. Similar to Pandora's Box in that it's very variant. Like you could get duds or you could get stellar things. Like you kind of roll the dice with it if you need to. Coffee Dripper. Now this is one I really like this boss relic. I probably overvalue it a little bit though. I think I've always thought it's less situational than it probably is. Because I've taken it before when I had no healing, right? And I've won with it in those situations. And I think that made me a little overconfident in it. So let's take a look. How often did I take it? So it's my second most winning relic. But, you know, for #1 player, still taken decently often. It does well, but you know, it's right around Pandora's Box, Empty Cage. So, and even in back then when there weren't as many good boss relics, so it's probably more situational than I'm giving it credit for. But I think if you have the healing, it's definitely pretty enticing. Like if you have like meat on the bone, if you have even like something like Eternal Feather, stuff like that, I think it's pretty good. That's also something to factor in. Is back then Eternal Feather was a boss relic, now it's a normal relic, so like there's technically more chance to maybe make Coffee Dripper work in 2020. But yeah, not much to say there. I do think you can still take it without healing if it's the best. If your other options suck, you're still not necessarily like this is an energy relic that has the potential to have no downside. Let's put it that way. Like some of these just always have a downside. Like Philosopher's Stone always has a downside. Runic Dome always has a downside. This is one where potentially it doesn't. In a world where you didn't need to ever rest, this has no downside and it's just free energy. And at worst, you can still upgrade your cards, right? Even if you wanted to rest and you can't, an upgrade is still nice. That's usually what you want to do anyway at a campfire, ideally. If you have like Wraith Form, Piercing Whales, the more of them you have, the more safe you can feel probably taking this. It's also nice to take this and then like look for like the Apparition event. Apparition event really loves to have Coffee Dripper. Curse Key. This is a relic that hasn't performed super well for me. I take it a lot, but I'm only 4 and 16 with it. But I can chalk a lot of that up to variance. You know, it's still relatively small sample size, and it's worth noting that, you know, Jorbs takes it. It's his 3rd most winning relic. I'd be interested to see which act he takes it in, though. I've generally thought it's similar to Busted Crown, though clearly based on the pick rate, that might not be the case. But I've always felt it's much better as an Act 2 boss reward. I mean, it is, but it's probably pretty takeable too as an Act 1 reward. I think a lot of times you're tempted into taking it and you shouldn't. Like if I have no strikes removed and it's my Act 1 boss reward, that's a pretty hard choice to really make because you're probably not going to end up removing many, if any, strikes in that run. It's either that or you're giving up your relics, right? Because with Cursed Key, something to keep in mind is you can just simply not open the chests, right? And you won't get a curse. You're just not taking the relic. I wonder if that is... I've tried that strategy too. I don't know if it's necessarily proper though, because I think generally for the event, like an event, you're not taking a random curse for a random relic. So there's like an argument there. At the same time though, like you're just passing up on relics. You do at least need to get your blue shard, but I don't know. It's a pretty good relic as far as energy relics go, but for me personally, I don't actually think it's one of the better ones in my opinion. But I see that that's possibly a bad evaluation, but that's just my experience with it. I think it really hurts your deck consistency, and if it's not hurting your deck consistency, then you're probably passing up relics in favor of the energy, which it's nice. It's one of those relics that gives you an immediate benefit with no immediate downside. It's kind of a delayed downside, so it's good in that sense that you can kind of snowball. You want the benefit. You generally want benefits as early as possible. That way you can just set up your snowball by targeting elites and stuff earlier, targeting more of them and whatnot. So in that sense, it's pretty good. But yeah. Then Ectoplasm, it's kind of similar story. Now Ectoplasm's an interesting one because I believe it's the only boss relic that is only offered in the Act 1 boss reward. Everything else can be offered in any boss reward, but this one can only be offered in the Act 1 boss reward. I think it'd be really good as an Act 2 boss reward, but I guess they thought that it'd be too good, so it's only limited to 1. Now, I will say, I think it's more takeable than people give it credit for. You know, how often, so he... Now, something to keep in mind here. So yeah, it's like around here in terms of how often it's picked. Though since it's only actually offered half the time compared to the others, I would argue you should maybe multiply each of these by 2. So that's actually more like, you know, 16 or whatever. So it's more around like Coffee Dripper and Pandora's Box in terms of I feel how generally often he would pick it. And for me, I take it, I guess not super often, but again, kind of double it, so it's more along those lines. So I think if you've removed a few strikes, if you have an okay amount of gold already, it's an okay option if the other options aren't that good. It's still free energy. You can it's another one like Coffee Dripper where you could technically never see the negative side of this if you keep in mind that you're just simply not going to target shops past like the most early top Act 2 shop. You're probably wanting, you're praying that you don't find the thieves. The thieves will completely steal your gold. But if you can bypass thieves and get to an early Act 2 shop, get some strikes removed, and then just not target any shops after that, Ectoplasm doesn't really necessarily have a downside, right? Not a downside that's like realized in that run. So it can be okay, but it's definitely highly situational. Like if you had no strikes removed and not a whole lot of gold, I don't know, I'd be pretty hesitant to take it. It's probably not worth the energy in that case. Fusion Hammer, this is one that I didn't realize how good it is until recently. And actually it was from looking at George's data that I sort of came around on Fusion Hammer. Like I always thought it was just sort of de facto the worst version compared to Coffee Hammer or Coffee Dripper. But if you look here, it's actually one of his most winning boss relics. 31 wins. That's pretty hard to ignore. That's double the amount of Coffee Dripper for him. Yeah, it's like it's a relic that kind of feels bad when you take it. It just has that weird feeling of not like a lot of times you're resting while already at full health, but it's like, I don't know, it turns out resting might actually be, it might be better to have the option to rest compared to have the option to upgrade a lot of the time. I think the data has kind of shown that, even in mine, that it's, if you see here, it's my 3rd most winning relic, and actually at the highest win rate for what that's worth, right? I'll probably be taking it more moving forward, and we'll see how the data normalizes, but it seems pretty good. And it's even better if you have something else you can do at, you know, what do you call it? Campfires, because yeah, if you have enough health, it's just nice to have that. You know, something like a shovel, something like a peace pipe, something like even like the lift relic, which I generally find useless. At least you can have the option to like up your strength or something like that. So those can even entice you more toward it. You know, I could argue that's maybe the best general energy relic. So if you don't take it, I'd give it a shot. You might see your win rate improve. Philosopher's Stone. This is an interesting one. I think now most of the energy relics we just went over, I consider to be all pretty generally good. I think this one still is as well, but it's a little bit of a step down. But for silent, you can often safely take this. A few things I factor in are like, do I have piercing whales? The more the better. Do I have a malace? Do I have footwork? Do I have wraith form? Do I have really good defensive options? Do I have a lot of weakness application? If the answer is yes to any of those, it's an option for me to take. If the answer is no to all that, it's not really an option for me to take unless you know it's like this and this, right? But you know, this Jorbs takes it decently often. It's on page 1, wins a lot. For me, it is, where is Philosopher's Stone? Oh yeah. So, you know, decently taken. It wins enough. But I'd say it's pretty situational. I generally, this is one of those relics where the downside is immediately realized and also just realized throughout the entire game, and even worse so toward the end when there's a lot of multi-attacks. I mean, you know, Awakened one, for example, has a 4-strike multi-attack. Time Eater has a 3-strike. The Heart has a 15-strike. But granted, it's like, I guess one argument you can make there, especially as a silent, is like, if you have a Piercing Whale, if you have a Malace, or if you have a Wraith form, that extra strength means jack shit to you, right? Like, you're mitigating it. The extra 1 strength doesn't really mean much in that case. Really, it's just, it can be rough against, like, the birds if you don't have Piercing Whale. It can be rough against any of the mobs or multi-attackers if you don't have Piercing Whale. So that's really all there is to say about that. Now, Runic Dome, I have strong feelings about this boss relic. I think it's the worst boss relic in the game. The only relic in the game, other than maybe, I think it's the only relic in the game where if there was 3 of them offered, I would skip. Like, I wouldn't skip these, right? I would skip this. I think it actively makes everything about your run worse. I think it's prismatic shard level in what it does. I think it's like, it can make for some entertainment purposes, but it does not make your deck better. And I will say, maybe I'm being irresponsible here, but you know, Jorbs did take it somewhat often, but I feel like that's just for streamer purposes, because if you look here, that win rate is so much lower than every other one of these relics, right? Like, it's just, you know, 8 and 25. It's not a huge sample size, but it's large enough, I feel, to at least, let's put it this way, I don't see any proof, at least, leading me to believe that it's anything good, right? Because his win rate, by the way, is way higher than 24% overall. It's like in the 35%. So the fact that you've even gotten to a boss relic already means your win rate is higher than that. And then you couple that, so it's like, you know, maybe we're looking at like 40-ish% is what your win rate should be after getting a boss reward. And it's only 24 here, so I just don't think it's good. For me, I pretty much never take it. I used to try it more, and I've hardly ever won with it. It's so bad. Like, people that say it's like okay, I just don't agree. I hard disagree for me. I think the argument people make is like, oh, attack patterns, if you know them, they're predictable. I'm telling you, I know every attack pattern in the game. I know what the percentages are, and I still think it's trash. There's only a very few amount of enemies in the game that are actually completely autonomous, as in they do the same pattern each time. Usually there's some element of variance, and that variance is usually something between 25 to 75% or a 50-50. You know, that's usually what you're looking at for being able to predict things. You throw in enough of those on any one run, and it's going to fuck you over at some point. Like, you know, not every enemy is the automaton, right? Like a lot of the enemies are like the gremlin leader, where sure you can kill his little units, and then that reduces anywhere his chance to attack to anywhere between 50 to 25%. That's still a significant percent of the show of the time he's going to attack, and you don't know if he's going to attack or not. Now, not knowing that is such a massive disadvantage. Who cares if you got extra energy? Like, you need to know, okay, I have only so many piercing wails, because really, like Act 2, you only have so many ways as Silent to take on Gremlin Leader, and you know you need to know when your piercing wails need to be played. You may only have one piercing wail, you may have two, whatever. You can't just burn them on a whim, right? And if you just have to guess, and it's like if you guess wrong, that's like 33 fucking damage or more coming in if you chose to attack. Because also it's like you can't play it safe either, right? It's a very fast scaling enemy. If you don't, what am I trying to say? If you don't like kill them fast enough, you have to apply damage, right? When his minions are gone, that's your time to start applying poison or just attacking him, whatever. If you guess wrong, you're fucking dead, and you're gonna guess wrong. You can't guess right all the time. And there's so many enemies like that. Even like the heart, like Time Eater, you can't predict Time Eater patterns. You can't, and you need to know what he's doing on any given turn. Same with Awakened One. You gotta know when he's multi-attacking. And even the heart, you know, it's like you know the turns he'll attack, but you don't know if he's gonna multi-attack. You don't know if he's gonna single attack, and it's a huge difference in what you're gonna do on any given turn, right? Like you have to know when to play your piercing wails, and if you're just guessing a 50-50, like your chances are pretty low to win with this fucking relic. So I think it's abysmally bad. I recommend never taking it personally. So Sacred Bark, I just don't know about this relic. So we have nothing to really go off of here. Although I will say, I don't see Sacred Bark being necessarily any better than White Beast Statue, and it's worth noting he never took White Beast Statue even once. For me, it, I guess, has technically a high win rate. Where is it? Sacred Bark. But I got a pretty good memory. I remember the runs I won. It could have been anything in the ones that I won, and I can also remember the ones I lost. The times I lost were when I had like every potion synergy possible. I had White Beast Statue, I had Potion Belt, I had even Toy and Thopter. Still lost, which tells me it's not that strong of a relic. Any of these other relics, if you have that amount of synergy going on with them, you will fucking win. I guarantee it. Like if you have Cursed Key plus Alma Mori, oh my god, you're gonna fucking win. If you have Snecko Eye with a ton of high cost cards, you're gonna win. I mean, if you have Snecko Eye in general, you're gonna win. But you know, if you have Fusion, like Coffee Dripper with a bunch of healing, Fusion Hammer, like those are the marks of like good relics, where it's like they're already okay, but with the synergy, they just become insane. This relic, I would argue, is just generally useless, and then with all the synergy, it's just still underwhelming. The thing is, like, there's a lot of potions that just don't even get any actual benefit from this. Like, you know, Gambling Potion, for whatever reason, doesn't actually double play it. I wish it did. And like Exhaust Potion, you know, you're not going to double your exhaust. Things like that. And even like other, like Weakness Potion, that's like, yeah, technically I apply six weakness versus 3, but is that really relevant? I don't really think so. I'd say 99% of the time that's not relevant. Same goes with vulnerability, even talking with Silent at least. You know, it'd be better if it actually, honestly, if it applied it twice, like in succession, it would actually be better, because then it could burn through 2 stacks of artifact, but that's not how it works. And even like something like Power Potion, it's still good, but it's not as good as I would want it to be. For instance, with Power Potion, it only doubles. You still only get the same offering once. It just doubles your choice of that. So let's say I would much rather it actually just give you 2 sets of choices. So like, for instance, you can low roll on your Power Potion, right? Like you can get tools of the trade and accuracy and caltrops in a fight that you could use an actual good power in, right? This won't help that at all. It'll just give you 2 of whatever bad power you were offered. I would much rather it kind of mitigate your chance at a complete low roll by just having that bad low roll and then giving you another complete set of choices. You know, the chances of getting 2 low rolls is infinitely worse than just the one choice, right? So I just don't find Sacred Bark to be that good. Like, you know, even with White Beast statue, it's just, I don't know, it's not that good. The times I won, it was like I chose it over something like this, right? It's like, okay, I guess it's technically better than complete trash, but it's still pretty trash in my opinion. Slaver's Collar, I think it's okay. Unlike the other energy relics, it has no active downside. The downside is really just the fact that it has no upside on the fights outside of the elites and normals, the elites and bosses. But I will say, I think that this might be slightly overrated by general players. Just my general heat check, I guess, but it's still pretty okay. I'm never sad to get this relic, let's put it that way. It's like a relic that feels kind of good to have, but I don't know if it's actually super powerful. It definitely allows you to take on more elites and stuff. It just, I don't know, using like an act, I like it better as an Act 2 reward, because I don't find the Act 3 normals quite so bad, but the Act 2 normals are pretty brutal, so as an Act 1 reward, it can be a little underwhelming at times, but you definitely like to see it on those elite fights, so I don't know, it's not a bad relic, I just think it's kind of middle of the road. And Sozu, now one thing to note here with this data is potions in general kind of got better since then, but I don't think it makes Sozu that much less good of a choice. I think Sozu's pretty solid, actually. It's also one that just doesn't feel necessarily bad. Like it's only minorly bad to see these potions scroll by and not be able to take them, but I think the downside, it's another one where there's no immediate downside like Curse Key. It just has like a delayed downside in the fact that you can't get any more potions. I think it's pretty similar to Curse Key in my opinion. Like, it has less ways to mitigate the downside. Like, there's no like Omamori equivalent for this, and there's also things like getting this and then getting a White Beast statue feels pretty crap, right? But it's also not the end of the world. Like, I feel like the downside of this is not as bad typically as like a Philosopher's Stone and whatnot. For me, it's one of my better relics. You'll see here, it's like, I've taken it this amount of times, relates to an okay win rate. Then I guess the final one to go over, oh, well, we still got to go over, so Tiny House just sucks. I don't know why this is a boss relic, and I don't know why it wasn't relegated to a normal relic in the last patch where all the other bad boss relics were. Somehow this slipped through the cracks. If you look at it, it's like, this just seems like it should be a common relic, right? It seems about like on the power level of your average common relic. This doesn't seem that different than like, what is it, Whetstone or War Paint. It's like, or even like Strawberry. It's like kind of in between all of these. I guess it's technically better than Strawberry, but I don't know if it's even necessarily better than these cards. Or, yeah, relics, not cards. A lot of common relics I would much rather have. Like, Happy Flowers way better. Data Disc for Defect way better. Mega Preps way better. Snecko Skull is definitely better. I mean, Snecko Skull should be a boss relic, honestly. I don't know how that's a common relic, but yeah, whatever. Not much to say about Tiny House. It just sucks. I mean, you know, he didn't take it, what, 5 times maybe, and that was back when there were worse choices. And I guess the last one here is Velvet Joker. I think this is a very underrated boss relic, especially in terms of energy relics. Let's see, I take it, you know, right, it's right around like Sozu, Busted Crown for me, and, well, not Curse Key, because I lose a lot with that, but, and even George takes it, you know, it's making his page 1 here. It's a pretty good win rate. The fact of the matter is, a lot of, especially with Silent, outside of like a Shiv deck, you're just not really playing 6 cards a turn. Outside of a Shiv or like a Bullet Time deck, which are non-ideal decks to begin with, a lot of decks you just, you know, you have some Crippling Clouds, you have Predator, you have Dash, you have Nightmare, you have Leg Sweep, you have these high value, high energy cost cards, and you just, Velvet Choker is a way to play them with basically no downside. I mean, a lot of times I take Velvet Choker, I rarely needed to play more than 6 cards in a turn. It's a card that kind of feels bad, like it feels bad to take, because you're like, oh man, now I can't like do more than 6 cards a turn. But in actuality, in practice, you hardly ever run into this downside. So it's a really good boss relic, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, as you can see, it does pretty well for me. And my, you know, my win rate's about like 10% lower than Jordan's on the Silent. So anytime you see me having a 50% win rate, that means that the relic did really good for me. So, you know, but take it with a grain of salt. There's very low sample sizes here, and obviously I've said Sacred Mark I don't think is very good at all, but you can see there it might be confusing to try to draw many conclusions just looking at these small sample sizes. And yeah, there you have it. Hopefully that helps. I think maybe if this challenged some of your preconceived notions on some of these boss relics and you've been struggling to climb on the Ascension or to win on Ascension 20, maybe it'll help you out. You know, target Snecko Eye, target Runic Pyramid. Don't be afraid to take Velvet Choker. Don't be afraid to take Fission Hammer. That's probably my biggest takeaways I could take you. And also avoid Wrist Blade, avoid Tiny House, avoid Runic Dome. Yeah, don't be afraid to take Astrolabe over Energy Relic. That's kind of the gist of it, I'd say, in a long-winded form. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.